Good evening and welcome to Chasing the Facts, and our guest this evening is Maria Santos.
Hi.
Local immigration attorney and member of the Chelmsford School Committee. We have to get that in there, but this evening we're not going to talk about Chelmsford Public Schools or the town of Chelmsford per se. Maria is our guest this evening to talk about her specialty, which is immigration law. So with that as a quick intro, Maria, could you just give us a very, very quick biographical sketch of your background and experience, and then we'll get into the meat of the show.
Okay, I would love to, and thank you for having me back to the show and for focusing on immigration, which is, of course, close to my heart, just as much as education is.
Absolutely.
So, background for me, I am an immigrant to the United States. I was 9 years old when I came to the United States from the Azores, Portugal, with my mom, my dad, and my sister. And we came to the Lowell area and lived in Lowell for several years before coming to Chelmsford in 1988. So I am myself an immigrant, naturalized before the age of 16, so it was a quick, became a citizen pretty quickly because my parents were naturalized as well. And I'm very proud to be part of the United States of America and call myself an American with a Portuguese heritage.
And we are very glad to have you.
Thank you very much.
We are.
I appreciate that. But I love this country dearly. So then I went through the education system, and my major in college was paralegal studies with minors in political science and English. And I decided I really would like to be an attorney, not remain a paralegal, but be an attorney. So I went straight on to law school. I went to Boston College Law School, graduated in 1988, passed the bar that first time that year, thank goodness, and then came to practice here in the Chelmsford community. And at the beginning of my practice, I did just about all conveyancing and real estate law with some other general practice for quite a few years. And then in 1996, and I know this very well because I changed partnerships in 1996 and I transferred myself over to Westford, although I've always lived in Chelmsford, and told my would-be new partners that I really wanted to now focus more on immigration. And from then on, that moment onward, I really started to only focus on immigration. And today, that's what I exclusively practice. I've been doing that now for well over 20 years, exclusively just immigration and naturalization law. Law school doesn't really teach you immigration law. You learn immigration law just like about any other area of law through your daily practice and a lot of reading, a lot of research, a lot of background work in order to get to that point.
I'm going to guess that you, and I may be wrong, but I'm going to guess that you probably didn't have a lot of mentoring in that area, did you? You had to kind of do it yourself, pretty much? Yeah.
To learn the attorney part of immigration, definitely. I was lucky that at the beginning, when I was learning this, I met a woman who was an assistant in our firm who had a bit of background in immigration, because immigration is a combination of procedural law and substantive law. And the procedure is a lot based on forms. And so people think, oh, I want to file a green card for my spouse from another country. What form do I need to fill out? Well, it's not one form, it's many forms. And what you put in there is very important. But you need to understand not only the form itself, but what's behind that form. And I was very lucky to have met somebody who understood the form part of it and then became myself. I taught myself a lot of things so that I understood the law and the history of the law and how to apply the law. And I always say this, and it's really true about immigration. You have to read every single day. It's in the news. Immigration law, sometimes you learn about it in the news. And that's been especially true since 9/11. Immigration in the United States has gone through a lot of changes. And it's mostly based on administrative actions and executive actions.
And really since the beginning of the Trump administration, I would say it's been a very hot topic, and it's been more in the news for the last 5 years than I think it's ever been in my lifetime that I can remember. So what do you see right now? What do you see as the country's biggest problem relative to the entire immigration situation? Are we having is the law a badge? Could it be made better? That kind of thing.
Oh, gee, Sam, I don't know. Do you want to?
How much time have you got,
yes,
right? I understand, but I mean,
usually
just
give this little
very high level.
I remember being at US INS, the former USCIS was INS. It's the Immigration Service in Boston at the district office with a couple for an interview. And he is a dentist and she is a dentist, very, well-educated individuals and so on. We get there, the first thing is they lost their file. Oh. So thank goodness I had a complete duplication of the entire file and we were able to proceed. But if we didn't, we couldn't. So at the end of it, I looked at the officer and I said, gee, what happened? And he said, we should take a match to the whole thing and just start all over again. This was the immigration officer at the agency. Now, this is years ago. The problem with immigration, I think, one of the problems with immigration, is also a problem with many other areas of law, which is if you practice based on agencies, agencies are the basis for a lot of what you do. A lot of agencies have not had the running that they needed to, have not executed the way that they needed to for many years. And it's culminated. And their agencies are at the whim and the will of whoever the executive is. So the president has a lot of power over an agency.
Right.
It takes a while for the wheels to change and for the law to be administered in a different way based on whatever that political will is. But
so a lot of it can get just bogged down in the sheer bureaucracy of it.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's happening now. Okay. So one of our biggest problems right now is the backlogs in the system. And COVID has certainly made it much worse. Because, for example, you and I were talking a little bit about this. If an American citizen wants to marry someone from another country, they come to see me, everything looks great, we prepare the filing, send everything in the usual way. Prior to COVID, and in the Boston area, you were looking at a 6-month process maximum. And the person would go to interview and have their green card and keep going on with life. Because without it, you don't have a social security number, you don't have an ability to really get a driver's license, to get a work authorization, do many of the things you need.
So explain to the audience exactly what a green card is and what it does.
Okay. So U.S. immigration is divided into various benefit areas. And one of the biggest dividers is family-based immigration and employment-based immigration. Okay, and those are the legal avenues to come to the United States. So, as a citizen of the United States, you can petition for your parents to come to the United States. You can petition for your children, unmarried, under the age of 21, to come into the United States. Green card holders who are immigrants in the United States can also petition for certain family members. So that's one basis of obtaining an immigration benefit. The other one is through employment. So if you are an engineer and you want to come and work in the United States and you have an employer who wants to hire you here, they may temporarily be able to bring you into the United States as a letter, an H-1B, which is a specialty occupation type of non-immigrant benefit, not a green card, not a permanent immigrant, but a temporary worker in
And
the
how
United
long would the
States.
H-1B authorization typically last?
So if you continue to extend it, the maximum amount of time under the law as it was written is 6 years.
Okay.
And then you would have to return to home country 1 year before you could even apply for another H-1. However, because it is taking so long for a person to, most people who come in on an H-1 want a green card eventually, want to become an immigrant, okay? So they want to change from that temporary status to a permanent status. And because of that, many folks who have come in the last few years in employment-based have been from India or China. So when you're looking at the backlogs, a person from China or from India who has a bachelor's degree, even a master's degree, is going to wait well over 10 years in the regular course of business to get a visa made available for a green card, an immigrant visa.
Wow.
All right, so they have to continue their status as a non-immigrant while they're waiting for that visa to become available. And so,
But the authorization is only valid for 6 years.
so they extended out that right through an order, okay, and a regulation eventually, which says that if the person has already filed for an immigrant visa but is just waiting for the visa to become available in the green card process, they can continue to extend out their non-immigrant H status in 3-year increments until their visa becomes available and they can get that green card.
Okay.
So it just means that that person is going to have to continue to have a sponsoring employer. And I have some who have been with the same employer, well over 10 years, who are my clients and waiting for a visa number to become available. So the it's not always beneficial to the economy either, because you should be able to shop around in the economy for the jobs that you qualify for. By the same token, an employer should be able to reach out to you and say, okay, I'd like to have you come and work for me. But to do that, they're going to have to go through a process maybe all over again in order to get the green card going. So there are things too in the immigration based on employment that also are not okay, need some fixes here. Now, employment-based immigration was not always part of our system. It's been only in the last few decades that it's been part of the system. And there are other categories. So refugees, temporary protected status, asylees. You've heard of DACA, which are the young or the
Talk
dreamers.
about that for a little
Okay.
bit, because that has been in the news, and I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about DACA status and what it is and what it means and so forth. So,
Okay, so I've given many talks on DACA at local universities and colleges because these are young people. These are really often children, 2, 3, 6, 7 years old, who came to the country accompanied by an adult. Not always their parents, sometimes a grandparent or another adult in their lives. And once they were here, they decided we're not going to return to the home country, become undocumented, or they entered through the border without documentation at all and brought the children, and these children are undocumented. Now, most of them find out that they're undocumented when they're at their end of their high school years, because suddenly they want to get a driver's license, they want to work, and they don't have a social security number. And so they end up asking their parents, what went on here? And they get a disclosure of you're undocumented, we're undocumented. And that actually creates a huge upheaval in many families because, here you are, you're a young person, you're 14, 15, 16.
completely assimilated
part of the United
to your
States.
life here in the United States.
Right.
I'm going to guess we have kids like that in our own high school.
Absolutely, and we have kids like this in the whole area, all of our area. And so and guidance counselors will call and say, what can we do? Can they go on to college? Well, no, if they don't have the ability, if they don't have the documentation, no, they can't go on to college. They can't be accepted by a college. K through 12 education, public education, is available to these children. But once they reach the end of it, they're not going to be able to go on. And in fact, many private citizens have come up with scholarships for them and so on, so that they can apply for a course here or a course there, but they really should not, they're not going to be able to get a degree unless they can become documented in some way. So during the Obama administration, he passed an executive order, issued an executive order for DACA.
Right.
Deferred Action for Early Childhood Arrivals. During the Trump administration, after about 800,000 young childhood arrivals applied for DACA, the Trump administration wanted to put an end to it. And they tried, they really did, but they did it incorrectly. So when it got to the Supreme Court basically said, you would have to start all over again. We're not going to rule whether or not it's constitutional at this point, but because you didn't do it correctly. So USCIS had to start at the end of Trump's administration to accept new petitions for DACA, because this is for people up to the age of 35 who came in here and have been continuously present, don't have felony convictions, don't have convictions in their record, and so on. There are certain criteria they need to meet. There's estimated about 1.2 million, only about 800,000 had applied, now more have again. So, you know, that benefit is for a very limited number of undocumented. So right now it's back in action, and you've probably heard that President Biden has said that he would like to find ways to increase the benefits of DACA.
I think if, you know, the unfortunate thing is that if everybody could hear the explanation that you just gave. I'm 74 years old, and I've known all kinds of people, and I've lived in places all over the world, and I have faith in the basic fairness of people. People want things to be fair, and I think if people could hear the explanation you just gave, 90% of people in this country would say, well, of course, something has to be done. Because after all, what are we talking about? We're talking about children that came here, and maybe at an age where they had absolutely no idea what was going on. They're living in a family situation. It's invisible to the community as to what their status really is. Most people probably don't know, because these folks are living, they have jobs, they have kids in the school system, and you've got a 15 or a 16-year-old young person in Chelmsford High School, and this is the only life they've ever known. They are completely assimilated. What is the difference operationally between that 15-year-old who's been in this country his whole life and a child who was born here? There is no difference.
Right.
You know, from a human standpoint, I'm talking about.
Right.
Okay. So that's the thing. I think if people could understand what you just said, I think people would understand that something has to be done. This has to be fixed. We're not talking about people jumping the border with bad intentions. Okay. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about young people who this is the only life they've ever known.
Right.
We have to fix this. I'll get off my soapbox.
I'll give you a little example that a mom came to see me, and she said, this is a few years, when DACA first came out, could we do my oldest child's petition? Because he was turning 16. And we did. Second child, she has 3 children. Second child, a couple of years later, we were able to file the petition. Then during the Trump administration, her youngest was coming up. Now this, she said to me, if there's any one of them that cannot return to home country, it's my youngest one, because he doesn't speak the language.
No connection at
He's
all.
not able.
Right.
he's scared
Of
about
course.
returning and so on. So during the Biden, we were just able to file his petition. It was a big thing for that. It's stuck, of course, with a huge backlog. So right now, our biggest problem is definitely these backlogs.
The backlogs, right.
Backlogs. And so a couple of things have happened this week that are kind of interesting to me. One of them, and people probably didn't see this as big news, but one of them is that now prosecutorial discretion has been made okay again in the immigration courts.
Okay.
Now, why is this important? This is important because although during the Trump administration, there was huge talk about we're going to deport, we're going to deport, we're going to deport. What actually happened was we're going to place them in court proceedings, and place them there. And we're talking about what, 500 judges to make decisions on millions of cases that are docketed. Now, prior to the Trump administration, we had certain priorities. Which people really should be deported, and are there certain things we're going to just administratively close the case, allow the case to be closed out, and allow this individual to continue here, have a work authorization while the course administratively closed, and allow them to remain here because they really are not a priority for deportation, because deportation cases take years many times.
So you're telling me that during the Trump administration, they basically said no more prosecutorial discretion
That's
in these
correct.
cases. This is the rule. Now, that makes no sense to me because prosecutorial discretion applies in the criminal law. It applies everywhere else
Right.
in the facet of law. So why would it be any different in this aspect?
Right.
That makes no sense at all to me.
Well, I think it's
So
just
I'm glad we're back to the way it's supposed to be.
we have it back, and it's been a bit slow because
Right.
here we are and it's already June, right? But that's a big thing that's happened again. And it could be that we're actually going to be benefited so much more.
Sure.
Because then the people that need to leave are going to
Right, exactly.
be taken out of our system here and deported, and other people. The highest number of deportations truly did happen during the Obama administration, and it was not during the Trump administration.
No, I understand that. I mean, anybody who reads the news objectively knows
Right.
that, and it always bothered me to listen to the politicians and the political rhetoric, because that is a fact. I mean, and that's something that is
the
easily
truth.
ascertained. Okay, it's not up for debate.
It's true.
Right.
So that's one great thing that I think it's starting to slowly come back. So hopefully some of those backlogs get eliminated. But COVID again exacerbated this because
Oh, yeah.
courts were not functioning at their
Now,
full speed.
is the COVID thing largely,
Right.
has that abated to the point where we can start?
Right. It's already returning. It's about 80% to
Okay,
90%.
good. So we'll
We're
get
now
there
starting
quickly.
to get
Right.
there. Another thing, consulates. Consulates have closed down, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Now, consulates are overseas, right? So they're actually, unfortunately, we had a couple of deaths at consulates in India from COVID. I believe something happened here, and the vaccine didn't get to them as quickly as it should have gotten there, and there were a couple of deaths there. And some countries have been in disastrous situations. So the fact that these consulates are closed down, here's what's happened. Every year, we process immigrant petitions under that family-based system in the millions, because there's a backlog of people waiting in line to come into the United States. So it's about 60-something thousand are interviewed monthly when it's in the regular year. Now, during COVID, it's all been shut down. So we're looking at a year and a half where the system has not really been working at all. There are over 500,000 petitions at the Visa Center in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, waiting to be shipped out to consulates when they're ready to interview.
Wow.
That's the backlog. Now you're talking about maybe a fiancé visa. for you, yeah, or a spouse, somebody married abroad or married before coming into the
Sure.
United States and to come into the United States. They're going to prioritize those, but still, there they are. So the backlog, because of that, is pretty huge as well. And then here at USCIS, we have huge backlogs too. And that's because we do check the background of every single person who either gets a non-immigrant benefit in some cases, or an immigrant, means green card, okay? And for people who apply for naturalization, which is another benefit administratively done through USCIS. All of those folks have biometrics done all over again. And then it goes through a series of checks through the FBI and other agencies to make sure that we're not going to bring a criminal into our legal system here. Those are backlogged like crazy. The biometrics appointments have not happened because of COVID. It's starting to now again, but that's happened. And there are people waiting just to get their work authorizations renewed for well over a year now. They can't, employers have had to take them off the payrolls, cannot keep them on the payroll. So those benefits.
So that's an economic impact
Right.
as well.
Yeah, I'll get employers calling me saying, really, they're essential to us.
Of course.
This person's position is essential to us. What do we do? And well, you're going to have to prove that it can be expedited. Based on what? That it's an economic hardship to the person. Everybody in the process is going to suffer an economic hardship. So it's going to be very difficult to expedite this. And that's where we are right now. Talking about the whole system, Sam, and you know, are we going to start all over again?
And we've got about 3 minutes, so that's
3 minutes
that's a
to
good
do
way,
that?
that's a good way to end.
We're going to have to do a different show.
Oh, we are, Maria, trust me, we will have you back. This is fascinating, and we could talk about this for hours.
It's the basis of our country. It's at the root of our country. We're multicultural in so many ways, but yet we have one American culture. That's just amazing. If you go to a country, let's take one country that doesn't have this. I think Japan is a country that does not have too many immigrants.
I've spent time in Japan, and so I do have some knowledge, and I would say that is an accurate statement.
Let's say that,
yes,
okay?
That is very accurate.
They have a very aging population. They're not going to be able to suddenly gear up and invite all the immigrants in, because it takes what we've got to be able to bring everybody in and to accept and trust and build what we have in this country. So I think, to me, it is so important that we get it right. It's at the base of how we are as a nation of people. And a lot has to be fixed in the immigration laws, because there's a lot of prejudicial things in our immigration laws that, you know, we can look at. This is still the land of opportunity. This is still where many, many people want to come, including all those folks at the border right now, right?
That's absolutely right.
Those 3 countries.
Yep, they're willing to risk, in many cases, what could be their lives.
And their children.
And their children to get in here. So the U.S., regardless of what you hear, some people say, and I just echo what Maria said, this is a great country, and I don't see any other country where we have the numbers of people that are trying to get in. You have a lot of countries where people are trying to get out.
Right. It's
you know?
true.
So,
and we can't welcome every single person.
no, and clearly there are people we don't want to come in here, and that's not a prejudicial statement, that's just a statement of fact. I mean, there are people with criminal records and so on and so forth. And we want a system that can make sure that we limit access as much as we can to those types. But the vast majority of folks that want to come here to this country, they're trying to better themselves. They're trying to get a better life. And my experience, and I've had quite a bit of experience working with immigrant folks, they're just as hardworking as anybody else, and they want to do the right thing. And we have to find a way to welcome these folks here, and to do it in a reasonable, and an expeditious manner. And Maria, we're out of time. Thank you very much.
That's great.
And we will have you back.
Thank
Believe
you.
me, we will.
Thank you. It would be a pleasure. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to Chasing the Facts. I'm Sam Chase, your host, and with us for part 2 of our conversation is Maria Santos, who is a local immigration attorney. Maria practices in Westford, and she's been engaged in that practice now for 25 years or so?
Well, as an attorney, well over 30.
Okay, but who's counting, right? Who's counting? And our last show, Maria was our guest, and we started to talk about some of the various facets of immigration and immigration law. What are the issues, what are the problems, and so forth. And we did touch upon the topic of what's broken and what needs to be fixed. So I thought maybe in this segment we could expand upon that, and we'll let Maria explain to us some of the proposals now that are being made to remedy some of the situations that we talked about on the last show and the general problem of excessive demand for people wanting to come into the country and the backlogs and so forth. So let's take a prospective look. We'll look forward now.
Okay.
Everyone's been looking backward. Let's not do that anymore. Let's look forward, and you can tell us, hopefully, some of the good things that are
starting to happen. At least from an immigration attorney's perspective, because
and yes, and that's a good perspective.
okay, as an immigration attorney, I would like to be able to have some solutions for people. And there are, every day, I will have a call, an email, something from someone that I definitely cannot help because there is not a law to resolve their problem, okay? And so, example, today, I received a call from a young woman who came into the United States as an au pair. And many young women come to the United States to take care of children for a certain amount of time as au pairs. And they come in on a visa called a J1, which is an exchange visitor category for visas. And they come in for a temporary amount of time, and then they have to leave. They do their work, they stay with the family, and then they need to leave. And she would like to be able to take a course in the United States. Now, to do that, she would need to change over to another category, which is F1, student, international student. And right now, the backlogs in our system are so large, and consulates are not really processing visas, that I had to give her all of this information that basically she's probably not going to do it because it wouldn't be in time and enough time to be able to do all that legally. So the legal immigration system has suffered right along with the folks who are not in the legal system, the undocumented, all right? So Biden comes into office, and you probably saw this in the news. When you look at the White House and the way he's decorated the executive office, the Oval Office, you're going to see he has an image of an immigrant rights leader, and so and so on. And he believes many things that should go forward on immigration. But many people believe, especially Democrats, people who are very more progressive, that it's going too slowly. It's not enough speed. One of the biggest problems has been the border crisis. And it is a crisis. When you've got children coming in from Nicaragua, from Guatemala, from El Salvador, and you're seeing that, you know, they're coming in every day, many times unaccompanied. They're unaccompanied minors, so they're being led into the United States. It creates a feeling that we're out of control. But they've been held up for so long, and so much has not happened in their countries for such a long time, no help there to get their economies going and to have opportunities in their own homeland, that they're all just trying to come in and run away from gangs and drugs and all kinds of really tough situations in their home countries. So that has added a dimension to right to the beginning of the administration that's pretty tough to deal with, and a visualization that's not all that great here. And it's happening during COVID.
Right, and I think, you know, purpose is not to be politically critical here, but I think it's fair to ask if you're going to, if you've got one policy in place and then you have a change of administration, and then you do what appears to be most people the exact opposite of what your predecessor was doing. I think it is a legitimate question to say, gee, couldn't we have anticipated that there would be this surge of people? And we have some very, very smart people working in government. We have a lot of smart people in the State Department, in the Immigration Service, and so forth. And it's just very perplexing to some to say, gee, this should have been anticipated, and there should have been some mitigation put in place. But, you know, coulda, woulda, shoulda. I mean, the trick now is we've got the situation. We've got to go forward.
We've got to deal with it.
And we've got to deal with it. And so what are we doing? And what are some of the initiatives that are coming forth
So
that'll
right
help
at
us?
the beginning of the administration, an act was introduced by the Biden administration,
Okay.
and introduced in both the House and the Senate. So in the last time we had anything pass in either one of those chambers was 2007, and it didn't go forward. Didn't go from the Senate to the House. So the Senate was the one really pushing. It didn't make it. Okay, so what is going to happen with this? It's more comprehensive. What he's proposing is comprehensive in many ways, because it would allow for green cards, for instance, eventually. So for dreamers, so we talked about DACA, which are
right.
the dreamers, okay? So I think the Biden administration understands that a lot of people in the United States do support the DREAM Act, do support these young folks. And it's a carve-out, remember now, it's only about 1.2 million. And do support the fact that they not only might get a green card, but eventually would be allowed to get citizenship. And this part of this proposed legislation has a possibility of going forward. But a lot of other parts of the legislation that have been, would not. Okay?
And we talked about this during the Bush administration. Let's remember, folks, this was a Republican administration, and they were in favor of doing something along these same lines.
And
Am
even
I wrong?
More, no, you're correct.
Okay.
But even more to then hit up on figuring out the rest of the problem.
Right.
The 12 million, and this 1 million something is only a little carve out of those 12 million.
Right.
Now, what's the proposal there? It's for it's a long process, 7 to 8 years in the process of eventually being able to apply for citizenship, naturalization. But it does have a path to citizenship in the bill. Many people believe, there are people out there who believe that they've committed a crime by entering illegally, by not going and waiting in line for a visa number to be made available like the rest of the folks who are waiting in line, that they've committed a crime, not a civil type of penalty, but an actual
A criminal act, right.
Right. So the last time we had any kind of legalization was the Reagan years.
Right.
Believe it or not, right? So during the Reagan years,
Unfortunately, I remember that.
me too, because I was in law school.
There you go.
And we had a section of the law called 245I, and there are employers out there who still remember this, because the way to legalize would be a family member petitioned and had filed a petition before April 30th of 2001. Yep. Or I'm going back so many years here, I'm forgetting the actual date. And then, or an employer had filed for a labor certification to have, they had a job available, and they said no American worker is available to fill this job. So that's the labor certification process, and had gotten that approval, but filed it by that deadline. That was the last time we were able to, these individuals paid a penalty, adjusted their status, and got a green card. And the penalty was, you know, $1,000, 15, it's depending on $1,000 penalty. Now, during the 2007, I remember talking and saying, okay, these folks are going to have to save quite a bit of money because the penalties that were being proposed, which were much higher, in order to legalize. But instead of criminalizing, it was just a penalty that was paid.
Right.
Okay? Today, if you entered without authorization and you have a relative who can prove, an American citizen or a green card holder who can prove that they will suffer irreparable harm if you have to leave the country, they will suffer harm, the U.S. citizen, then you can get what's called a provisional waiver in the United States. It only forgives unlawful presence, being here in the United States without authorization. And then you have to return to your home country, go to the consulate for an interview, and come in with a green card.
Okay, so basically that says, okay, that never happened. Go back and start over.
Right, and it forgives that unlawful presence,
Okay.
which many have had for many, many years in the United States. But you have to have that relative, you have to have that deep connection, which would be a spouse or maybe a parent. So it doesn't happen too often.
That actually happened to somebody I know a few years ago.
Yep.
That's exactly the process.
Yes,
Yep.
exactly. So, but it's limited. And so one of the proposals that I've heard discussed and the possibility is that there would be a revival, potentially, of a 245I. And if that were to happen, that it might become part of some budgetary type of legislation. Because now remember, that's the only way we're going to overcome the filibuster problem, right?
Exactly.
So watch for that. See if there's something. Many people are asking me, what do I listen to in the news? What do I watch for? And so on, to understand what might happen with immigration. Well, some fix may be appended to a budget type of item. And one big one that we're going to have come up possibly is infrastructure, right? Where there may be some agreement on some infrastructure bill, and there may be some component of immigration that becomes part of the infrastructure law.
Well, I have yet to see a major piece of legislation that goes through clean. And what I mean by that is the purpose of the legislation is to accomplish X, and that's all that's in the bill? Okay, how many things typically are attached as riders and so on and so forth?
So let's talk about that for a minute, because I've thought about that quite a bit. And during COVID, for me, I would go to the grocery store at limited times, and the people that I saw working, cleaning the carts, doing the things that maybe were more risky than other people, I knew who they were, and I know, what their status is and so on. Can we look and see if maybe essential workers, people who did a lot of this essential work, some of them also were not part of this group that really will continue to do essential work in the country? Because the reality is that they're here, there are over 12 million, and very few of them don't have something to do. Okay?
Well, that's the part that's always mystified me. I mean, you just described it perfectly. You've got 12 million people, and let's say 11,700,000 of them are employed. Okay, so if you have a job, it means you're essential. I don't care what the job is. If the function you're performing and getting paid for were not needed, the job wouldn't exist. So you're here, you're working, I don't care what the job is, you're contributing to the economy.
So that's why 245I
Right.
might be a solution. And the reason is that if the person does have employment and the employer is able to become a sponsor, okay, and not have repercussions as a result of becoming a sponsor of a person who's undocumented, then 245I might be a solution to this. And some of these folks may be essential to continuing work in the United States and continuing on with the economy. So this is the thought, okay, that I've heard as a potential solution to some of the problem. Are we going to get comprehensive legislation? Comprehensive means we look at the entire immigration law, where it's at, and say, well, maybe we shouldn't be giving as many visas to family-based immigration. Maybe our country needs more employment-based in certain categories, okay? People get scared that immigrants are going to take their jobs. But I've got to tell you that we just got an extra, 22,000 H-2B visas. That's for seasonal work. You've probably heard there aren't enough employees to fill the jobs at the Cape.
That's been a problem for years.
Right.
Years.
And usually how those are filled is by these temporary J-1 workers who
Right.
come into the United States. But now remember, we said, especially in our last segment, consulates have been closed. COVID has closed them down.
So they had no place to go to fulfill that process, right?
No visas being processed.
Right.
So they're not coming into the United States. And so those jobs, those temporary jobs are not being filled. And so H-2B extensions for people who are already here could transfer to another employer. So maybe they had been seasonally working in someplace up in Maine in a ski resort, but now want to work down at the Cape for the summer, and we could transfer them. Some more, they were taken up in 5 days. 5 days, gone. Seriously. So is the need not there when we can see that? Now, another example of this for temporary workers is H-1Bs. Every year, April 1, a lottery is run for 85,000 visas, 20,000 for master's degrees earned in the United States, and the rest for basically people with bachelor's degrees level of work. 65,000 for one, they go in one day, and over 200,000 filings occur to get that limited number of temporary visas. Start of work is October 1. We're doing this on April 1. So they were all gone for this fiscal year. They all got taken up. We're filing the ones who won the lottery now, okay? They do a registration system, and the ones who win then have to do the complete filing. So is there a need for temporary workers? Very likely. What's the level of the worker? We'd have to have some comprehensive understanding of what our country really needs. Some other countries have done this already. That would be Canada, which right now is benefiting from our broken immigration system because they're getting quite a few employees there transferred to Canada. And then England has done some of this, Australia. The English-speaking countries, if you look at their immigration systems, they've looked at this and see, okay, this is what our country needs, this is what we're going to require. And taking a look at it again every single year to see what the country continues to need in terms of immigration. That's going to require some tough choices. Are we going to increase or continue the same level in the family-based immigration and then still allow the employment base to come in at a higher level or whatever the country needs?
There'll be some spillover there, but not
too much.
Not too much, right?
Not too much.
Not too much.
It's usually more, you know, the backlogs in the family-based immigration, what we call the quota system that's there. One fascinating thing to listen to is every month the Department of State now is doing a YouTube interview with Charlie Oppenheim. Now, Charlie runs the visa bulletin numbers, and it's fascinating to see because he has pointed out, and it's true, the fact that we have all these backlogs at the consulates means that those unused visas that didn't get processed there for family-based immigration under the law have to be applied to the employment-based immigration, which means that folks from India, China, who have been waiting for 10 years or more to get a visa number made available so that they can get their green cards, are finally starting to move up in this year and the next year because no processing has happened on the family-based. So we can see the interplay.
Yeah.
Is that an answer? Not really. You're playing one group of people against another.
Exactly.
And you're using the law and just kind of manipulating things. Congress is our representatives. They need to truly look at this and see what the country needs and how we can fill those needs and still be equitable and just in the system. That's what I think.
It sounds so simple. The way you just said it, it sounds simple to me, and this is the frustration that we have with our elected officials because they can't stick to the knitting. They can't focus on what they should be doing. It's all this other stuff. It's all this political stuff that they get bogged down into. Is it too much to expect somebody that we send to Congress and their salary now is a couple $100,000 a year plus benefits? Is it too much to expect that individual to focus on reality and to focus on what is good for this country? And when I say what is good for this country, it includes what you just said. In other words, it incorporates our values. Very important, okay? We said in our last segment, this country, it is a country of immigrants. It's a country that's built on people coming into the country from other places, bringing that experience to the table, and then it gets broadened out into an American culture. It gets blended and melded in. Not to say that people forget their cultural heritage. We're not talking about that, and that's not desirable. People should always retain that. But whatever they bring, it gets put into the pot, if you will, and we have the American culture. And the only way we're going to keep that strong and growing is to make sure that we have the immigrants coming into this country, the ones that you know, most of them are who we want. I mean, we can talk about the criminals, but that is a very small number.
It's a small percentage,
Right.
And what doesn't get talked about too much in our news and so on is the number of immigrants who have made immeasurable contributions to our economy.
Of course.
And to our system. You look at the number of Nobel Prize winners, not just Peace Prize winners. You look at the number of entrepreneurs who are in major corporations in the United States, Facebook. You look at Google. Just think about it, and they're immigrants. Such a huge number.
And 100 times more that have started very small businesses, been very successful. You only have to look at Lowell, parts of Chelmsford, right around us. I mean, you can see it, and you say, this is the American dream. Could they have done this in their own country? Maybe, but it's even with all the obstacles that they face as immigrants, it's easier for them here because of the opportunity.
What I really, for me, because you know I'm on the school committee, I think many times about
That's not bad. We got almost all the way through without talking about that.
talking about education.
But that's okay. Let's talk about it.
But there's a huge interplay between immigration and education.
Sure.
There definitely is. I can never understand why we would educate someone, be it K through 12, or we allow them to come in here as foreign students. What is it? University of Michigan, is it like 22% are international students? All right. Look what's happened to them during COVID. They
Right.
didn't get to come in. Why would we give them an incredible education and then not allow them opportunities to stay on and do more incredible things?
Yep.
This is, when I file a petition for an outstanding researcher, I just filed one a week or so ago. It's this thick. It's piles of patents, contributions to journal articles, all kinds of things for great stuff, including the technologies that allowed for the development of the vaccine that we just, have in our society today, that I think has been incredibly beneficial. So why would we not want somebody like that, if they truly have the credentials, to be able to stay here? But we have to, and we prove it. We send in the proof in order to be able to do it. They get to a certain time where they then can file because they have to amass all of this ability. It's not immediate. It's not like this. Our law requires that they prove they can really contribute to the system. And I just don't see when it gets to that point, unless they have a criminal background, and we check that during the process, that we would not want them in the United States doing great things, including creating jobs, which they do all the time.
Right.
Sure, there has to be a limit. I mean, not every single person can come in.
Of course not.
This is true about every country.
Of course.
We have to have borders.
Of course.
We're a nation and a country.
Of course.
Right? We have to. But we need to define who can and who cannot legally come in here, and then just enforce it. And so part of the legislation would be to make sure Real ID is really in place all over the country, and that E-Verify, which is an employment-based verification system, whether the person really is authorized to work, make that mandatory, which is not mandatory right now for employers. And that is an added expense to employers, there's no question. But actually, some employers really love working with it because they know, at least 90-something% of the time, that if they put that person in the system, they're going to know for sure whether the employment authorization is okay or not.
Right. Right.
So, so that might be another way for checks and balances, and it's part of the legislation that has been proposed. So let's see if that works out.
Well, that's good. So we've got about 2 minutes. Do you believe it?
It just passes too quickly. Sam. That's the way it is.
We said before Maria and I started to tape, and we've had this conversation before, and we talked, and we said we could go on for 4 or 5 hours and not cover all of the subjects and topics that are relevant to the entire field of immigration. I find it very, very fascinating. So I'm going to give you the 2 minutes, and you can just wrap it up any way you want.
Oh, let's see. So for me, when I was growing up in a predominantly Portuguese-speaking home, where I became the first graduate with a bachelor's degree and then an advanced degree in our family, we hosted 5 Japanese exchange students. It was the funniest situation in our home because we had these young ladies here to learn English. My parents were learning it right along with all of us, And then there was me and my sister. We usually were the cultural and linguistic translators in chief. But one thing I learned, immense people, but the Japanese, but they learn all about diversity and multicultural societies from coming to the United States, because theirs is not. It's very homogeneous.
Right, exactly.
So I think we have a great thing here. You do not know how many of them want to come back all the time because they feel at home. They feel, even though in their own society sometimes they don't, because they want to explore and have more opportunity and so on in their society that's not offered to them. We live in a great country, but it's because of our diversity. And immigration contributes hugely to that diversity. And that's the basis of my love for immigration.
I think it's wonderful that you were here. It's wonderful that we have these conversations, and we have to keep up this discussion. And we will have you back very, very soon and to update us on the new developments. So thank you very much, Maria.
Thank you
and we'll
so
see
much.
you soon.